guarded by black wrought iron gates and a small army of hydrangeas. I rang the bell twice, no answer. I stepped back and pressed the intercom. Hello. After a pause, Mrs. Langston, our longtime housekeeper, responded. Miss Julia, I wasn't told you'd be coming. Are they home? Silence. Then I'm sorry. Mr. Hart said, no visitors this week. Especially not family. Especially not family. My stomach dropped. You mean I'm not allowed in my own house? I'm so sorry, she whispered. They left for the airport this morning. Didn't say where. I stood there, wind cutting through my coat, heart thudding like a hollow drum. I didn't cry until I got back in the car. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes before turning the key, staring at the steering wheel as if it held answers. I drove home in a daze. Ethan opened the door before I knocked. They're gone, I said. He didn't ask questions, just pulled me into his chest and held me as I shook. Amy came over that night with wine and every terrible romantic comedy we'd ever watched in college. We lay on the floor surrounded by candles and pizza boxes, trying to pretend I wasn't collapsing inside. They don't define your worth, Amy said, wrapping an arm around me. They never did. I nodded. But deep down I still clung to that image. My mother appearing last minute in a tailored suit. My father walking me down the aisle. Luke grumbling as he handed Ethan the ring box. The fantasy was dying, but I wasn't ready to bury it. For days before the wedding, the final fitting arrived. My dress, ivory silk with delicate bead work, hung in the bridal suite like a promise waiting to be broken. Amy and I drank coffee while the seamstress adjusted the hem. The boutique was quiet, the kind of silence meant for reverence. As I stepped onto the platform in front of the mirror, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mom. A flicker of hope ignited. I opened the message. Don't expect anyone to show. Family Retreat 2023. Blessed #family time. I stared at it, jaw clenched so tightly my Merzact. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They had coordinated an entire retreat to coincide with it. The kicker. In the background of the photo, almost hidden behind a palm tree, was a white banner flapping in the breeze. Zooming in, I read the words, Hart Family Retreat 2023. My breath hitched. Not a coincidence, not a spontaneous trip. This had been planned weeks, maybe months in advance. They'd waited for this exact day. I zoomed back out and studied their faces, bright, joyful, untouched by regret. My chest constricted. I couldn't breathe. Ethan gently took the phone from me. He saw the image, his expression darkening. They planned this, he whispered. On your wedding day. I nodded, unable to speak. Amy put her hand on my back, grounding me. They didn't forget you, Julia. They excluded you. That's different and worse. Tears welled hot and uncontrollable. I felt foolish, like a child at school waiting for parents who never arrive. Only this time, the parents had flown to paradise and toasted to my absence. The betrayal settled into my bones. Not just their lack of presence, but their celebration of it. I had imagined disappointment. Silence, a few regrets maybe, but this was orchestrated cruelty. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and let the silence stretch. Ethan sat beside me, not speaking, not moving, just present. It took hours before I said anything. They could have just stayed home, I whispered. Said they were busy, but they made sure I saw them together, happy without me. Amy's voice was gentle but fierce. You deserve better than them. I didn't respond. I couldn't because some part of me still wanted to be chosen. Still believed that if I were better, quieter, more obedient, maybe they would have loved me back. But staring at that photo shattered the last of that illusion. They didn't want me. And that realization broke something I would never get back. The next morning I woke. Before dawn. The text, the photo, the banner, they haunted me in the silence. But somewhere between despair and exhaustion, a different feeling emerged. Resolve. I walked to the window and watched the sky turn from charcoal to pale blue. The World hadn't stopped turning, and neither would I. When Ethan stirred awake, he reached for my hand. How are you feeling? I squeezed his fingers. I'm still getting married today. His eyes searched mine, waiting for signs of collapse. Instead, he found steel. I won't let them steal this from me, I said softly. This is our day, not theirs. Preparations began in earnest. Amy arrived with the makeup artist. The florist delivered the bouquets. My gown was steamed, my shoes lined up by the mirror. The air buzzed with gentle chaos. And though my heart still ached, I was calm. At noon, the ceremony began. The courtyard at the grand summit had been transformed. Autumn leaves rustled overhead. Burgundy ribbons adorned each aisle. Lanterns glowed softly against the early October chill. Guests, friends, mentors, colleagues filled the seats. Each face was one I had chosen. Each hug, each smile held warmth unmarred by bloodlines. But as I stepped to the threshold alone, my knees faltered for just a second. I'd always imagined walking down the aisle with my father. That vision, as toxic as he was, had lodged in my heart from childhood. Now the space beside me was painfully empty. I took a breath. Then from the front row, someone stood. Mr. Lewis, Amy's father, walked toward me with quiet purpose. He didn't say a word, just extended his arm and gave me a look that said, I see you. I'm here. I nodded, tears threatening but not yet falling, and took his arm. As we walked down the aisle together, the guests stood. The music swelled. Ethan's eyes locked with mine, steady, tearful, proud. And in that moment, the loss was still there, but so was love. The ceremony was simple. We exchanged vows we had written by hand, promises of respect, partnership, laughter, and grace. We didn't mention the absences, but everyone knew. At the reception, after the first dance and toasts, I took the microphone. The room quieted. I looked out at the sea of familiar chosen faces. Today is not about what's missing, I began. It's about what's here. A hush settled. Family, I continued, is often defined by blood. But I've learned painfully that biology doesn't guarantee love. That sharing a last name doesn't mean sharing support or compassion or joy. A few nods, a few misty eyes. My family is not the one I was born into, I said, voice clear, strong. My family is the one who shows up, who chooses me, who stays. I scanned the room. Amy, Ethan, Mr. Lewis, my college roommate, my old calculus professor, people who had shown up when it mattered most. This day could have broken me, I said. And maybe it almost did, but instead it reminded me who I am and who I want to be. A beat, a breath. To everyone in this room, you are my real family, and I will never stop being grateful for that. Applause burst. Not thunderous, but full, genuine, grounding. I stepped off the small stage. Into Ethan's arms. He whispered, you were perfect. No, I murmured. Forehead pressed to his. We are. And, just like that, the weight began to lift. Not because the hurt was gone, but because it no longer owned me. The wedding had ended hours ago, but sleep never came. I sat in the hotel suite, still half-dressed in my gown, hair slightly undone, mascara faintly smudged under my eyes. Ethan had fallen asleep. On the couch, jacket tossed over him like a blanket. He looked peaceful, the only stable part of my chaotic world. I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. I had debated this moment for months, long before the invitations were ignored. Long before the beach photo. Long before the final text broke the last thread between me and my family. Now there was nothing left to wait for. I opened the encrypted folder titled Heart Access. Years ago, when I was made a formal board member for Optics, my name had been added to every major account and internal corporate platform. They never expected I'd use it. They thought of me as harmless, a well-dressed shadow with a title but no teeth. Tonight, they would find out. Otherwise, I logged into the board portal first. My removal request was already drafted, saved weeks ago. I filled in the final date, digitally, signed, and hit submit. One click, and I was no longer legally responsible for their decisions, no longer part of their empire. Next came the corporate banking portal. I had limited authority, but just enough. My name was tied to 4 major discretionary spending accounts: entertainment, travel, hospitality, liaison, and executive miscellaneous. The same accounts Luke used for retreats and lavish dinners. The same accounts that paid for their flights to Bora Bora. I selected all 4, froze them. The system asked for confirmation twice. I didn't hesitate. I made sure to exclude payroll and vendor contracts. No hotel employee would suffer because of my decision. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about drawing a line. As I worked, Ethan stirred behind me. "Julia," he mumbled. "It's 3 a.m. No, I said quietly. He rubbed his eyes, walked over, and crouched beside me. "What are you doing?" I turned the screen toward him. "Finishing something." He read for a moment, his brow furrowed. "You're pulling out of the board?" "Yes." "And freezing discretionary accounts?" "Yes, but only the ones tied to their personal spending." He stood up, pacing. "I get it." "I do. But is this really how you want to start our marriage?" I looked up at him, calm and clear. "This isn't about revenge." "Then what is it?" "It's about power," I said. "About telling them I see what they did and I won't stay silent. They need to know there are consequences." Ethan exhaled. I don't want this to consume you." "It won't," I said gently. "But they've treated me like a placeholder my whole life. Now they'll know I was the foundation." He stepped closer, touching my shoulder. "You sure?" I nodded. "They don't deserve a war, but they do deserve a lesson." He was quiet for a moment, then kissed the top of my head, "Then teach them." I smiled faintly. Final confirmation submitted. I logged out and shut the laptop. Outside, the first light of morning was just breaking. The city was still asleep, unaware that something had shifted. Overnight. Not in the company, in me. I was no longer their safety net. I was no longer waiting for their love or recognition. I was no longer willing to play by their rules. I had rewritten them. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Jonathan Reed, a private attorney I'd worked with once in a personal matter, independent, discreet, with no ties to the Hart Group. The second was to Margaret Chin, a forensic accountant known for her ability to turn chaos into order. Within hours, we were on a group call. "I need you to compile a report," I told them. "A full breakdown of my contributions to the company over the past 5 years. Projects I led, crises I solved, revenue I protected, everything. I want it documented. Emails, data, timestamps." "Why no?" Margaret asked gently. I paused. "Because they've built an empire on my silence. It's time the truth had a record." Margaret began digging into archived reports, financial audits, internal memos. Jonathan started assembling legal safeguards, ensuring my actions from the night before couldn't be spun as sabotage. While they worked, I waited. 3 days passed. Then the flood came. My inbox lit up with fury. The first emails were confused. "Why is my card declined? Are you having issues?" Then came the accusations. "You had no right. This is petty and childish. You're burning down the family legacy." My mother's email was cold, clipped. "You always had a flair for dramatics. I just didn't expect you'd do it in a wedding dress." My father's was longer, angrier. "You've embarrassed us. Do you think the board won't hear about this? Do you think investors won't panic?" Luke sent a voice message, slurred, furious. "You think you're so smart, Julia? Go ahead, destroy everything. But don't come crawling back when you realize no one else wants you." I stared at the screen, oddly calm because I didn't feel regret. I felt free. That evening, while Ethan and I were eating takeout on the couch, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but instinct made me answer. "Hello." A pause. "Julia Hart," A voice whispered. Yes. Who's this? It's Maria, she said. From finance, Maria Santiago, mid-level manager. We'd worked on a pricing model together 2 years ago. I'm calling from my personal phone. I just wanted you to know. We see what you did. My stomach tightened. Maria, no, it's not what you think, she said quickly. We're not mad. Some of us, we're relieved. Relieved. You finally stood up to them. For all of us. Do you know how many times they ignored warnings, pushed impossible deadlines, cut people out of bonuses? Because Luke overspent on his travel junkets? I said nothing, stunned. We're not supposed to say this, she continued. But if you ever start something of your own, we want in. My throat tightened. Maria, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, she said. Her voice suddenly hopeful. I will, she hung up. I sat frozen, Ethan, watching me with concern. What happened? I looked at him, overwhelmed. They're not just angry, I said. Some of them are inspired. He smiled slowly. You just started something bigger than a wedding. They didn't call. They didn't text. They showed up. My name is Julia Hart. On the morning of my wedding, I stood in a lace gown, heart pounding with anticipation until my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Don't expect anyone to come. My breath caught. I opened Instagram. There it was, a photo of my entire family smiling on a beach in Bora Bora. Right. Then I realized they hadn't forgotten. They had planned this. They chose to celebrate without me on the biggest day of my life. And that was the moment everything changed. Not just for that day, but for the rest of my life. I was born into the Hart family. Yes, those Harts. The Hart Group had become synonymous with prestige, owning over 24 luxury hotels across the East Coast. My father, Richard Hart, was hailed as a visionary in the industry. My mother, Evelyn, the perfect socialite, played her role with calculated grace. From the outside, we were the kind of family that graced magazine covers. But from the inside, I was never quite sure where I fit in. I was the youngest child and the only daughter. Luke, my older brother by 5 years, was the golden boy from the beginning. Charming, careless, and constantly celebrated. He could barely pass his college courses and yet was showered with praise for the smallest of achievements. My A's earned me polite nods. His C's earned him vacations. My father once bought him a Rolex when he almost made the dean's list. Meanwhile, I poured everything I had into proving myself. I graduated top of my high school class, got accepted into Harvard, and earned an MBA in hospitality management with honors. I interned at International Properties during summers, studying real estate trends and operations analytics before it was fashionable. While Luke partied in the Hamptons, I crunched numbers in Singapore. When I came home to join the Hart Group, I thought foolishly that my hard work would finally pay off. That? Maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as an asset. My father greeted my return with the corner. Trevor, my cousin, Luke's peer, entitled but not in temperament, stepped forward. I hadn't seen him come in. He must have followed behind them unnoticed. I read the documents, he said, voice low. Every page. My father turned. Trevor, not now. No, he said firmly. Now, exactly. He looked at me. I always thought you were exaggerating. He admitted that. Maybe you were just intense. But this, he lifted a page from the file. This is undeniable. I blinked. You believe me? He nodded. I'm ashamed I didn't sooner. Luke scoffed. Don't be dramatic. Trevor ignored him. He turned back to me. If you start something new, I want in. I'm done watching incompetence get rewarded. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge. Not triumph, just truth. My father looked betrayed. You'd abandon the family for her? Trevor met his gaze. She is family. You just forgot. Luke slammed his folder shut. This is a joke. No, I said softly. It's a reckoning. My mother finally spoke, voice trembling. Julia, please don't let this tear us apart. I stared at her. You tore us apart when you booked that retreat. She dropped her gaze. My father bristled. You're playing a dangerous game. I stepped closer. It's not a game. It's a line in the sand. You taught me how to negotiate. Now I'm negotiating. He glared at me silent. Trevor turned to leave. You have my number, he said. Call me when you're ready. Then he walked out, leaving the door wide open. And for the first time, the air felt like it belonged to me. The silence that followed Trevor's departure was thick and strange, like the air before a storm. My father's jaw ticked, his hands clenched around the armrest of our dining chair. My mother sat still, eyes glazed. Luke paced the room like a caged animal. I remained standing. There are 3 things I want, I said, voice level. 3 conditions, that's it. My father scoffed. You think you're in a position to make demands? I know I am, I replied. You walked into my home after ignoring my wedding, after stealing my work for years, after treating me like an accessory to your empire. Now you'll listen. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand, not to silence, but to signal control. The balance of power had shifted, and we all knew it. First, I began a formal acknowledgement written and signed of my contributions to the Heart Group over the last 7 years. Projects I led, contracts I secured, crises I resolved. No PR spin. No buried footnotes. The truth, my father grunted. That's ridiculous. My mother glanced at him uneasy. Second, I continued, financial compensation equal to the bonuses and stock options awarded to Luke during the periods where I did the actual work. Luke exploded. You're insane. You're not getting a cent of mine. It's not yours. I cut in coldly. It never was. He fell silent. And third, I said, a legal agreement stating that none will interfere with any business I launch in the future. No sabotage, no undercutting, no legal threats, total separation. My father stood abruptly. Absolutely not. Then we're done, I said, folding my arms. And tomorrow morning, every news outlet from the Wall Street Journal to Boston Business Weekly will receive a file titled The Ghost Behind the Heart Legacy. He froze. I've already prepared the folder, I continued. Emails, board minutes, revenue charts. Every instance of misattribution, every time I was erased. Your investors will know. Your board will know. Your clients will know. My father's face turned crimson. That's blackmail. No, I said softly. It's truth delivered. With consequences. My mother finally spoke, voice brittle. Julia, sweetheart, let's not do this. We're family. I looked at her. Really looked. You watched them walk all over me for decades. You said nothing. And on my wedding day, while I stood in a white dress waiting for a miracle, you raised a glass on a beach in Bora Bora. She winced. I'm not your sweetheart. Not anymore. She swallowed hard. Was it? Was the wedding at least beautiful? I stared at her, emotion rippling beneath my skin. It was perfect, I said. Because none of you were there. She flinched like I'd slapped her. My father paced, muttering under his breath. Then he stopped. What happens if we agree? You get your account's unfrozen, I said. And I walk away for good. You'd really cut ties, he asked, almost incredulous. I already have, I said. This is just the paperwork. He glanced at Luke, who looked pale, then at my mother, who said nothing. Finally, he sat down defeated. Send the documents to our lawyer, he said. I already did, I replied. He let out a sharp laugh. Of course you did. I turned to Ethan, who had stayed quiet this whole time. He met my gaze with quiet pride. My mother stood slowly. You really won't forgive us. I met her eyes one last time. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just done. And with that, they left. No dramatic goodbyes, no apologies, just the quiet click of the door closing. I walked to the window, watching them disappear into the gray morning. Behind me, Ethan wrapped his arms around my waist. You were incredible, he murmured. No, I whispered, leaning into him. I was necessary. 6 weeks after the final documents were signed, I officially filed paperwork for my own firm, Hart and Wells Consulting. Not the heart of old, not the empire, just the name I was born with, paired with the man who had stood beside me through it all. Ethan. And I turned our spare bedroom into an office, a folding desk, a whiteboard with color-coded notes, and 2 mugs. That read CEO and architect. We took no investors, no fancy launch party, just experience, grit, and a shared vision. We weren't trying to build an empire. We were trying to build something better. Our mission was clear. Help small independent hotels find their identity. Again. Not just survive, thrive. We wanted to give them what I had spent years giving Hart Group for free and without credit. And this time, we do it. On our terms. The first contract came from a family-owned inn in Vermont. They'd been around since the 1940s, struggling to compete with chain resorts. Their rooms were outdated, their website from 2009, but their heart was strong. The owner, a woman named Diane, reminded me of what hospitality was meant to be: service, not spectacle. We redesigned her pricing model, refreshed the rooms using local craftsmen, updated their online presence. Within a month, bookings doubled. The second client was a seaside bed and breakfast in Rhode Island. The owners were a retired couple who had poured their savings into the business, but couldn't get traction. We introduced seasonal packages, built partnerships with nearby vineyards, and trained the staff on guest experience without sacrificing authenticity. The third was a historic boutique hotel in Savannah that had lost its identity. In a sea of modern redesigns, they wanted to restore the old charm, but didn't know where to start. We brought it back to life. Stained glass windows, handwritten welcome notes, jazz in the lobby. All 3 clients referred others. Our inbox filled. People wanted more than spreadsheets and logos. They wanted soul. And Ethan, he flourished. He brought creativity to structure, empathy to design. Watching him work, sketching floor plans with one hand, sipping tea with the other, was like seeing a man come fully alive. We made mistakes, of course. One project fell through when a developer changed course last minute. Another hotel didn't follow through with the execution. But even in failure, we were learning. Every contract was a choice. Every client a connection. And slowly, steadily, the life we were building stopped feeling like a rebound and started feeling like a beginning. Late one night, after wrapping a video call with a client in Arizona, Ethan turned to me. "You know," he said, "we could have just taken a honeymoon." I laughed. "This is a honeymoon, working 16 hours a day in sweatpants with you." I smiled. "Perfect." He reached for my hand. "We're not just building a company," he said. "We're building something they can't touch." And he was right. Hart and Wells wasn't just a business. It was proof that family could be chosen. That success could come without betrayal. That healing didn't have to wait for an apology. That love, real, rooted, resilient, could rebuild anything. 1 year after our wedding, we threw a party. Not a renewal, not a vow ceremony, just a gathering. A celebration of survival, of growth, of beginnings that bloomed from endings. We held it at the Grand Summit again, in the same courtyard where I once walked the aisle alone. Only this time I wasn't trembling. The guest list was small. No extended family, no board members or corporate allies, just friends, colleagues, clients who had become confidants, people who had earned their place, not inherited it. Amy brought her new boyfriend, a quiet software engineer, who doted on her like she was the center of his universe. Mr. Lewis, her father, gave a toast that made me cry. Maria from finance came too, now working for a startup and glowing with freedom. Trevor arrived late, carrying a bottle of wine and a handmade card. He joined a new consulting firm launched by former Hart employees who had jumped ship after my departure. We hugged without words. Ethan and I danced under string lights, while jazz floated through the night air. There were no photographers, no media buzz, just laughter, clinking glasses, hugs that lingered. It was everything my wedding should have been, everything it was, despite the absences. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Ethan and I sat on the hotel balcony, legs tangled, watching the city. Pulse below. "I didn't think I'd be here a year ago," I whispered. He kissed my temple. "Where did you think you'd be?" "Still chasing their approval," I said. "Still bleeding for love that never wanted me. But now I know better." That night, while Ethan slept, I checked my email one last time. There it was, a message from my mother. Subject, just a note. I hesitated, then opened it. "Julia, I've been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. Nothing urgent yet, but the doctors are concerned. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from someone else. If you'd be open to meeting, I'd like to talk. No expectations. Just maybe a coffee. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. Once this would have shattered me. The mere idea of her being sick would have cracked my resolve. But now I felt still. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because silence was its own kind of clarity. Forgiveness, I had learned, didn't always require reconnection. Sometimes it just meant letting go without letting someone back in. Ethan stirred behind me. "Everything okay?" he murmured. I nodded. "Just a message." He wrapped his arms around me and pulled me back to bed. And I left the message unopened the next morning. Moved it to a folder. Labeled past, not rejection, just release. Months passed. Hart and Wells grew slowly, intentionally. We turned down clients who didn't fit our values. We said yes to projects that lit us up. We traveled. We rested. We lived. I began writing again. Essays, then short articles, then a column in a hospitality magazine. I titled it Redesigning Legacy. The first piece went viral. People reached out. Strangers with similar stories, daughters dismissed, sons disowned, professionals undermined, all seeking what I had fought to find. It became clear over time that my story wasn't rare. What was rare was surviving it with grace. And that became my mission. Not to punish the past, but to build a better future for myself, for others. One evening, as we closed the books on a particularly long project, Ethan asked, "Do you ever miss them?" I thought about it. The birthdays, the holidays, the imagined memories that never came. "I miss what I wanted them to be," I said. "Not who they were," he nodded. Then I smiled. "But I don't miss who I was around them." We toasted quietly, just the two of us in our little home office. And I wrote down the words that had come to define my life. Family isn't where we come from. It's where we are loved. Right. A firm handshake and a brief "glad you're here." My mother commented that I looked tired and should consider fewer hours in the sun. Luke, of course, had just been promoted to Senior VP of Development. He had no practical experience and barely knew how to read a profit and loss sheet, but he had the family name and the effortless charm my parents adored. I was placed under brand strategy with no clear job description, no team, and no budget. A glorified intern with an Ivy League education. Still, I kept my head down and worked. I presented proposals for new digital marketing campaigns, rewrote outdated guest experience policies, and quietly salvaged vendor relationships that Luke nearly destroyed with delayed payments and broken promises. I solved problems. He took credit. But nothing encapsulated my invisibility better than my 33rd birthday. I had no expectations for a party. Still, I assumed anyone, would remember. That morning, I walked into the office to find my desk untouched. No card, no flowers, just a stack of reports someone else didn't want to deal with. Around noon, I overheard excited chatter from the executive lounge. Balloons, laughter, champagne corks. Luke's birthday brunch, one assistant whispered to another. My stomach sank. Luke and I were born exactly 2 years and 4 days apart. Our birthdays always fell during the same week. They'd celebrated his with a catered event and a custom cake. Mine hadn't warranted a sticky note. That evening, I went downstairs to the hotel lobby. Miguel, the night security guard, noticed my face and asked, "Bad day, Miss Hart?" I smiled weakly and shrugged. "It's my birthday." He blinked, then grinned. "Wait here." 10 minutes later, he came back with a cupcake from the cafe. A single match stuck in the middle in place of a candle. "Rules say I'm not allowed open." "Flames," he joked. We sat on the front steps watching taxis speed by, sharing stories about crazy guests and impossible schedules. For the first time that day, I felt seen. And that's when it hit me. In the company my family had built, in the empire that bore our name, I was just another employee. Invisible, uncelebrated, and expected to be grateful for crumbs. My official title at Hart Group was Strategic Liaison, a name so vague even the HR director once asked me what I actually did. In reality, I was the invisible fire extinguisher, constantly cleaning up behind Luke's missteps. I saved the Miami renovation from a permit disaster. I renegotiated contracts in Chicago when a developer bailed last minute. I stayed up until 3 a.m. correcting hotel occupancy forecasts that Luke had miscalculated by almost $500,000. No recognition, no bonus, no thank you. Then came the Paris deal. It was a boutique hotel near the Seine. Family-owned, elegant, and ready to sell if the buyer promised to preserve its historic charm. I worked months on that. Negotiation, flying back and forth, learning French legal codes, building trust with the owners. They finally signed under the condition that the property would not become another glass and gold tower. I returned to New York, exhausted but proud. I had pulled off a miracle. A week later, the press release went out. Hart Group expands to Europe. Luke Hart leads historic Paris acquisition. I stared at the headline like it had slapped me. Luke had never set foot in France, hadn't attended a single Zoom call, had once asked me if the hotel was in Paris or that other French city. And yet there he was, quoted as visionary dealmaker and future leader of Hart Group's global expansion. I went to my father's office, heart pounding. "I led that deal," I said, trying to stay calm. Luke wasn't involved. My father didn't look up from his tablet. Public image matters. Luke has the name, the charm. It's better for the brand. Better for the brand. I wasn't even human to them, just leverage. Something inside me cracked that day. Not with rage, but resolve. That night, I started backing up every email, every calendar invite, every document draft, every version history with my metadata clearly stamped. I created a private folder called Ghost Files and my insurance policy. And I watched each time I patched a broken vendor relationship. I logged it. When I caught errors in Luke's Q4 reports that would have sunk investor confidence, I documented it. I was done being erased. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what my mother said that Christmas. Dinner was stiff as usual. Luke bragged about the Paris deal. My father beamed. I sipped wine. Said nothing. After dessert, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother. She was polishing her wine glass, eyes glassy. "You've always been intense," she said vaguely. "Too ambitious, too much like your grandfather." I opened my mouth to reply, but she cut me off. "You know, you weren't planned," she said almost casually. "I had just lost a big contract in London. Your father and I were barely speaking. When I found out I was pregnant with you, She stopped, swirled the wine. "I kept you because Richard thought a daughter might stabilize things. Make us look complete." She didn't say "I love you." She didn't say "I'm glad I did." She just walked out of the kitchen, heels echoing against marble. I stood there frozen, hands gripping the countertop. I was a publicity stunt, a press release in diapers. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe something I had buried for years. They didn't just ignore me. They resented me. My birth wasn't a blessing to them. It was a strategy. And they never stopped treating me like one. It started with a late meeting and a misplaced blueprint. I was walking through the unfinished lobby of our Boston Harbor project. trying to locate the correct electrical routing plans. The site manager had gone home, and the contractors were circling like confused bees. That's when I heard someone say, "You're looking at it upside down." I turned. A man in a hard hat and worn jeans stood across from me holding a mug of black coffee like it was armor. "The blueprint," he added with a grin. "You're reading it from the emergency exit inward. Everything's reversed." I laughed, slightly embarrassed. "I've got 3 degrees and can't read a piece of paper." He extended a hand. "Ethan Wells, architectural consultant. They pull me in when things go sideways." I shook his hand and felt something strange. Ease. Ethan wasn't polished. He didn't try to impress. His boots were muddy. His watch was cheap. And when he smiled, it was with his whole face. We ended up talking for almost an hour about floor plans, thermal insulation, and why some luxury hotels were starting to feel like sterile tech offices instead of homes away from home. The next day, he sent me a follow-up email, not about work, but a link to an article on sustainable design. "Made me think of your comment about breathing spaces," he wrote. I was intrigued. I replied. Within a week, we were grabbing lunch. Within 2, dinner. No candlelit proposals, no grand romantic gestures. Just long conversations, shared observations, and that rare sense of being seen. Ethan came from a middle-class family in upstate Pennsylvania. His mother was a retired schoolteacher. His father had worked for the Postal Service. He put himself through college, took night jobs at construction sites, and never once acted bitter about it. He was grounded, direct, and refreshingly free of pretense. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing. I wasn't Julia Hart brand strategist. I was just Julia, messy, tired, curious, hopeful. He asked questions no one in my world had ever asked. What do you want? Why are you always the last one to leave the office? Did they ever say thank you? I didn't have answers. Being with him felt like an exhale I'd been holding for 35 years. After 3 months of dating quietly, I introduced him to a few close colleagues. They liked him immediately. One joked, "It's nice seeing you smile like a human again." I wasn't ready to bring him home to my family. Not yet. But the moment came sooner than expected. Hart Group's winter gala was approaching. A black tie event filled with shareholders, investors, and endless performance theater. I was expected to attend with a guest. I chose Ethan. He rented a tux, polished his boots, and walked into that ballroom like he belonged, not because he was arrogant, but because he didn't care about the pedigree game. People stared. My mother blinked at his introduction. My father raised an eyebrow. Luke whispered something to a VP, then snickered. Still, Ethan was unflappable. He spoke with the catering manager about waste reduction, complimented the violinist, and asked thoughtful questions about hotel acoustics. He held my hand when no one else was watching. After the event, my father called me into his office. "Where did you meet him?" he asked bluntly. "On site at the Boston Harbor project," I replied. "He studied me. You know, he used to work with M. N. Lehigh, right?" I froze. M. N. Lehigh was one of Hart Group's fiercest competitors, a family-run chain known for sniping hotel locations and undercutting deals. 3 years ago, I said, for one project. He left on good terms. My father narrowed his eyes. "Be careful, Julia. People like that, men like him, they know how to look innocent, but they always want something." I wanted to argue, to scream. Instead, I stood up, leveled my voice, and said, "Maybe he just wants me." I walked out before he could respond. But that conversation planted a seed of doubt, one that my family would soon water with cruelty. The real ambush came a week later under the chandeliers of the Hart family's annual winter brunch. It was supposed to be a family-only celebration. No shareholders, no press, just relatives. And champagne. My mother insisted Ethan come. "If he's serious, let's see how he handles us," she'd said, her voice syrupy, sweet with a bitter core. Ethan wore a charcoal gray suit, simple, sharp. He brought a bottle of artisan wine from a small vineyard in Oregon, carefully chosen after remembering my father once mentioned he liked reds. He was trying, really trying. We hadn't even made it through appetizers before the knives came out. "Ethan," Luke said, swirling his drink with theatrical flair. "Didn't I see you in some photo online dining with Bernard Koiber last month?" I froze. Koenigbur was a notoriously aggressive investor with ties to our main rival, M. and Lehigh. Ethan blinked, confused. "I don't know anyone by that name." Luke smirked, pulling out his phone. He turned it toward the table. There it was. Ethan, blurry in the background of a restaurant photo, seated across from a balding man in a tailored suit. The caption read, "Power lunches never go out of style." Insider talk. My father leaned forward. "You didn't mention you were still talking to men people." "I'm not," Ethan said, his voice steady. "That photo, it's from almost 3 years ago. I was consulting for a building permit. That man, whoever he is, was at the same table, but not with me. Bit convenient." My mother murmured, sipping her wine. "Old photos, no explanations. Quite a pattern, isn't it?" Ethan looked at me, then back at them. "I've done nothing wrong. But the damage was done." Whispers spread across the table. My aunt leaned toward her husband, murmuring something about being careful. My cousin excused herself to make a call. It felt orchestrated, too targeted, too timed. When we left, Ethan stayed quiet until we were in the car. I didn't realize they hated me this much. "They don't hate you," I said. "They hate that I love you." Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Something about that photo gnawed at me. I remembered the watermark in the corner. Nighthawk Images, a boutique paparazzi agency known for high-end gossip. They didn't cover random engineers unless someone paid them to. I reached out to an old college friend who freelanced in digital media. "Can you trace the source of a paparazzi submission?" I asked. An hour later, she replied. Submission came from an anonymous source with a burner email, but payment that was processed through a shell account tied to Heart Group's internal discretionary budget. I felt my blood run cold. I dug deeper. The shell account was linked to Luke's corporate travel fund, something only executives had access to, meaning he had paid someone to tail Ethan, to dig up old dirt, to plant a seed of betrayal. He hadn't just manipulated a moment. He had weaponized it. The next morning, I confronted Luke in his office. "You hired someone to follow Ethan." He didn't even blink. "I protected the family." "You humiliated me." "You lied." "You're too smart to fall for someone like that." "He's beneath you, Julia." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You're beneath me." I walked out, went home, and proposed to Ethan myself. There was no ring, no audience, just us standing in the middle of our kitchen. "I don't care about their rules," I said. "I don't care about pedigree or perception. I care about truth, and you're the only one who's ever given it to me." Ethan didn't speak. He just pulled me close, whispered always, and kissed me. We announced our engagement the next day. My parents didn't call. Luke sent me a thumbs down emoji, and I felt more certain than ever. I had chosen the right family. Even if I had to build it from scratch, I didn't want a fairy tale wedding. I just wanted it to be ours. Ethan and I sat at our tiny dining table with a spreadsheet open and 3 tabs of venues flickering on my laptop. The Grand Summit Hotel, a historic ivy-covered building in Boston's Beacon Hill, wasn't part of the Heart Group. That was deliberate. I wanted a clean slate, no legacies, no ghosts in the walls. When I confirmed the reservation, I felt a strange surge of liberation, as if I'd snipped a wire no one could see. We picked a date in October when the leaves would burn gold and burgundy. We agreed on local food, acoustic music, and a ceremony in the hotel's walled garden. Despite everything, I still mailed invitations to every member of my family. My mother, my father, Luke, even the cousins I hadn't spoken to since college. A childish part of me whispered that maybe they would surprise me. Maybe someone would remember I was still part of them. Ethan watched me address the envelopes. "You sure you want to do This, he asked. They're still my family, I said. And if they choose not to come, that's on them. The RSVPs trickled in. Some didn't reply at all. Some sent cold pre-printed. Regrets. Scheduling conflict. Out of town. Best wishes. One envelope came in familiar cursive. My Aunt Regina, she'd always been kind to me. She used to send me postcards. From her travels. Little pressed flowers inside. She once taught me how to tie a scarf in 4 different ways. My hand shook as I opened her reply. It wasn't the RSVP card. It was a letter handwritten, 3 pages. My dearest Julia, it began, I want you to know that if the world were only about love and fairness, I would be there with bells on. I would sit in the front row and cry through every word of your vows. You deserve joy and you deserve to be surrounded by those who have seen your heart. But the world we live in isn't fair, and your father has made things clear. He told me that if I attend your wedding, my shares in the company will be reviewed. That he will make life difficult. Julia, I'm not proud of this. I feel like a coward. But I have a disabled husband, 2 sons in college. I can't risk it. I'm so sorry. Please know that I will be thinking of you that day and cheering silently from afar. Love, Aunt Regina. I read it 3 times. Then I sat on the couch holding the letter like a piece of broken glass. Ethan found me there an hour later. He read it over my shoulder quietly. She loves you, he said gently. I know, I whispered. But love in my family came with disclaimers. I didn't blame Aunt Regina. She had more courage than most. At least she told me the truth. Everyone else just ghosted me behind polite lies. We continued planning. I picked out a dress with Amy, my best friend and maid of honor. We sampled cakes, debated napkin colors, laughed over Ethan's attempts to dance. But behind every laugh was a bruise. Each empty RSVP chipped away at hope. Still, I clung to it. Maybe someone would change their mind. Maybe on the day itself someone would walk through the door and say, I couldn't stay away. I held on to that image like a talisman, even as the evidence against it mounted. One night, while designing the seating chart, I paused over the family table. Should we leave their seats open? Amy asked. Leave them, I said. They still have time to show up. It was only later, so much later, that I realized hope too can be a form of denial. With each passing day, the silence from my family grew louder. Ethan kept a spreadsheet of confirmed guests highlighting new declines in gray. We'll still have 50, he said, trying to sound upbeat. That's a solid number, but I could see it in his eyes. He hated watching me get hurt, even more than I hated the hurt itself. I refreshed my inbox obsessively. No updates, no late RSVPs, no change of heart. 1 week before the wedding, I decided to go to my parents' house. No calls, no texts. I wanted to look them in the eye and ask, are you really doing this? Their townhouse in Back Bay looked as it always had, immaculate. It was a Thursday morning, gray and cold. Ethan and I were having coffee when the pounding began on our apartment door, sharp, deliberate, angry. I opened it to see my father standing there, face flushed and jaw clenched. Behind him, my mother clutched her designer bag like a lifeline, eyes rimmed red. Luke paced the hallway like a storm cloud, fists balled lead. I didn't flinch. Julia, my father barked. What the hell do you think you're doing? Good morning, I said calmly. Would you like to come in? He pushed past me without waiting. My mother followed silently. Luke scowled as he stomped in last, muttering, unbelievable. Ethan stood from the couch, protective, but measured. I nodded at him. It's okay. I walked to the dining table where 3 folders waited, one for each of them, thick, tightly bound, labeled by name. I figured this was coming, I said. So, I prepared something for you. My father crossed his arms. Prepared what? A confession. I slid the folders toward them. A record. They exchanged confused glances, then opened the files. Inside, copies of emails, project briefs, timelines, memos. each one clearly showing my hand in critical decisions. Beside each, the public credit given to Luke, the bonuses issued to others, the awards and speeches I was excluded from. My mother flipped through hers slowly. Luke's eyes narrowed as he skimmed the documents, his face draining of color. This is doctored, he said. No, I replied. It's curated. There's a difference. My father slammed his hand on the table. So what? You're mad we didn't applaud louder? You freeze company funds over hurt feelings? No, I said quietly. I did it because you erased me for years and then you celebrated that erasure in Bora Bora on my wedding day. My mother looked up, guilt flickering before pride smothered it. We were protecting the family brand. I laughed once, sharp, humorless. You were protecting your control. At that moment, someone else spoke. From